Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Kaye Playhouse at Hunter College in New York City. We are sitting live, and tonight is a very special event for us because it marks the debut of the Jäger Meisters Chamber Orchestra. It will be conducted by the American conductor, Eduard Zilberkant. He's the conductor of the Fairbanks Symphony and a brilliant pianist in his own right. And three international soloists, Claire Huangci from America, Massimiliano Ferrati from Italy, and Matei Varga from Romania. They are all veterans of the festival, and we are delighted to have them back. Massimiliano played the first season many, many years ago. That was already 16 years ago, where Marta Argerich came to the concert, and he was such a great success. He's been back several times. This is a milestone in the history of the festival, and we are ecstatic, and I know it's going to be a very exciting performance. I've heard the rehearsal, and you'll be delighted watching this around the world. I'm sitting with this American pianist, my colleague and great friend, Nina Tichman, who will be performing later this week on Tuesday night, and I'm hoping that you will be able to watch her because she's a magnificent artist. We had her last year. She's some of the most beautiful Schubert playing. It was a great, great success, and she's returning now to perform Debussy, the first book of the Preludes, and the famous G major sonata. It's not quite the posthumous, but it's next to the three posthumous sonatas. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you. I'm also looking forward to this concert so much. Such great pieces. The Mozart concertos are among my favorite pieces in the whole world, and to get to hear two of them on one night played by such magnificent pianists is really going to be a treat.
Well, it's a special event. In fact, the whole festival, we're now moving into the second week of the festival, and having you here is of great delight because you are a brilliant teacher. You've spent so many years at the Hochschule in Cologne, and have made so much of your career in Germany and around the world. Tell me a little bit about your, being at the Hochschule and what it was like to live in a country and speak fluently German and become so engrossed with this culture and what has happened at the Conservatoire.
Well, it's not as if I went to Germany and spoke German fluently immediately. It was an uphill struggle, but it was a wonderful, wonderful experience to immerse myself in that culture. I had the good fortune as a very, very young child to live in Europe with my parents who had Fulbrights, as I did many, many years later. So my first years in school were actually in Rome.
In Rome? Did
Yes.
you learn Italian at all?
Absolutely. It was my first foreign language.
Fantastic.
And my father always said to me that I was always oriented towards Europe because of that very early experience.
Well, indeed, and also in terms of the repertoire and in terms of the whole Western culture that you represent, of course, and your love of Schubert, and of course those years at Juilliard with Steuermann. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Well, actually, unfortunately, I didn't get to study with Steuermann because he passed away just before I was hoping to go into his class. But I had the great good fortune to grow up in a family of musicians in and around New York City, and to live in a community in which this shared love of the arts, of course, especially of music, this shared love of the tradition, was perhaps the most defining fact of my childhood. And my dream, before it was even conscious, was to live in a community of like-minded artists. And I must say that coming to a festival like this is, at least for 2 weeks, a little bit of a realization of this dream, because of course in real life things look a little bit different, but there's nothing more wonderful than spending time with other musicians who think and feel in similar ways, and to exchange ideas and to hear each other play and support each other. It's really a gift.
As you know, the young people that come here absolutely adore the festival because they have the freedom to go in and out of any number of studios, have any number of lessons, and of course listen to some really magnificent piano playing that is taking place on the stage of the Kaye. Tell me a little bit about your own program, because you will be doing Debussy, which is a bit far away from the Schubert Sonata, the G major, which you'll be performing later.
Well, it's interesting because, as I mentioned to Eduard a couple of nights ago, these are two composers who are very dear to my heart for very different reasons. And I put this program together just instinctively. I just sort of a feeling. I thought, I think this might somehow work. And I actually knew that I wanted to play the Debussy in the first half. And not in the second half. And as I began practicing these two pieces next to each other, I began to see certain relationships, which were only intuitive before. There are certain key relationships. There are certain ways that Debussy travels through different keys and creates certain connections that are actually, I can't say they're echoed in the Schubert, because of course the Schubert was written first.
What is so indicative of these composers, both in the Schubert, and they're just touching the original chord, is the love of the piano.
Absolutely.
The love of the sound of the piano, and the fact is, you're playing the music you love because it gives you so much. I mean, these tonal colors, and even Schubert, just the very beginning of it, the tonal colors of this music are just exquisite. And of course, this is why you love this music, of course.
I guess so. There's also, well, the thing is, in Debussy, I'm going to give away a big secret, which is not a secret. The secret to playing Debussy is listening to the overtones, which means listening in between the notes. And actually, that's sort of the secret of playing Schubert also. And there's a certain quality of listening that you develop when you immerse yourself in these composers that it just puts you in a different place.
Yeah, it's all in the sound. It's all in the sound, and this is so important. One of the things that I find among young pianists is they sort of think this is impressionistic music, and the exactness of the rhythm and the exactness of the score is sort of incidental to the sort of the lush sound, the sort of beautiful sound. And to me, I find all the freedoms and everything is they're meticulously written by Debussy.
Absolutely.
And I think the score is so vitally important. And I get very upset when people just sort of randomly, edit as they go along, thinking that this is sort of the way it should be. But I think it's absolutely as meticulously written as any other classical composition. I'm sure but you're trained in that. You and I have been grounded in real discipline.
Yeah, really, for sure. But I think it's very interesting. Two things I'd like to say about that. I studied in Germany with a teacher who, one of the teachers I studied with, did not have a huge influence on me, but there were a few things that just he would drop a comment, And I remember when I was playing one of the first pieces of Debussy I played when I moved to Europe, and that was L'Île Joyeuse, and he said to me, sometimes Debussy you can play very dryly, without much pedal. And it just opened my mind to a whole, I was a student.
Yes, of course.
And then the other thing that I've always been fascinated with is Debussy as a reflection of the French mentality. And on the one hand, you have this very mellifluous language with the liaison and where the words flow into each other in this very kind of wavy, undulating language, and then you have this unbelievable precision and clarity of the French
absolutely.
mentality.
Well, there's a very important point that also needs to be made is his instrument was probably a pleyel, which has a very, very different sound from the German Steinway. And it has a much greater clarity in these instruments. And of course, the action is of course much lighter as well. So I always think about this, well, how would Debussy have played his own music? And I often think about Chopin and Liszt and Beethoven. Well, how would they play their own music? What are the extremes, and what is the touch? What is the sound? What is the expression of this? I mean, Beethoven being one of the greatest music dramatists of all time. And so, of course, you have, in Schubert, you have this phenomenal great song composer. They're singing constantly in these scores, and I love it myself. And I'm sure the same is true. The vocalization of Debussy is very clear also. It's not just piano writing. He's an instrumentation of an entire orchestra.
And it's also the language, the diction of the language.
Absolutely.
And that also, plays into our experience when we play these pieces.
Well, how do you feel? How many times have you done this? I mean, I'm delighted that you're doing it at the festival. These are one of the parts of the International Keyboard and Student Festival is that the great repertoire is hopefully played by great pianists. So it's a great learning experience because you're exposing them to great performances of repertoire that they themselves ought to and will at some point study.
Absolutely.
So I'm delighted that you're doing this. Tell me, how did you prepare for this concert? I mean, what does it take to actually play Debussy on a first half, which is a completely different mindset, to going through an intermission and coming out and playing Schubert?
Well, Jerry, I'm sure you know the old saw, practice, practice, practice. I practice.
Well, it's not a matter of how do you get to Carnegie Hall. Practice. Well, you've practiced, and you're at the Kaye Playhouse in New York, and it's a wonderful, wonderful theater, and we're absolutely ecstatic that you are here. Tell me now, you have some other things on your agenda.
I'm going to be going up to a festival in Wareham, Massachusetts, called Music from Wareham, no, it's actually called Music from Land's End.
Land's End.
And I'll be playing chamber music up there. I'll be playing the great Schubert Fantasy for four hands with Anthony Spiri, whom you know.
Anthony Spiri.
Who is coming to the concert on Tuesday, by the way. And I'll be playing the Dvorak Piano Quintet.
Oh, excellent.
And a contemporary
So
piece.
you're going to be busy.
Absolutely.
Tell me now about
And as a matter of fact, the week after, when I go to Italy, I'm going to be playing the Jerome Concerto that Claire is playing tonight.
Fantastic. Well, this will be a wonderful experience. Tell me now a little bit about Germany and your tenure at the Hochschule in Cologne.
Well,
you've been there for so many years.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I love to teach. It's a passion that has sort of developed as I've taught over the years. It's a wonderful school. It's the largest conservatory in Europe. And we have a fantastic school with fantastic colleagues, one of whom is also here. My colleague Gesa Luecker is also at the festival. I love the school. I love the city. It's a very interesting city with a great commitment to modern music, and also in the meantime a great tradition with historical performance. So it's a very vibrant musical and intellectual context in which we can teach and encourage our students to go to great opera and great museums.
Well, of course, Cologne is sort of centrally located, very close to Belgium, France, Netherlands, and sort of encompasses with a great musical tradition, of course. And we're ecstatic that you have been able to come here and bring all that knowledge. Tell me now, how did you arrive and how did you get to Cologne? How did that happen?
Well, that was kind of an interesting experience. I participated in a wonderful program in Dartmouth at the Hopkins Center for the Arts when I was very, very young. It was a program run by Mario de Bonaventura, who was a conductor. And he was very interested in contemporary music, and when I was there were residencies by Henry Cowell, who was still alive,
wonderful.
Zoltan Kodaly,
Great.
Aaron Copland, Elliott Carter, all of the great living composers. And one of the people he invited to this festival was Siegfried Palm, who was a great German cellist and musician and a real champion of contemporary music, and somebody who inspired composers like Penderecki and Bernd Alois Zimmermann, many people to write pieces for him.
Yes.
And Palm was doing a master class in Dartmouth, and I was playing Beethoven cello sonatas for this master class. And Palm and I hit it off like
So
a
he
house
said,
on
"Come
fire.
to Cologne."
And he said, come to Cologne.
Listen, we're about to have David Dubal give his pre-concert lecture. Let me invite you to join us after his lecture, because we'll be talking about the faculty concert of all this wonderful faculty that will take place Monday night, tomorrow night, and I'll be interviewing a number of those people. I'm delighted that Nina Tichman is here. Please tune in or come to the concert this coming Tuesday. That's what is the date exactly?
28th.
July 28th. And thank you, Nina, for being my guest at the opening of this wonderful Jäger Meisters Chamber Orchestra. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Scott Gentile, and I'm the assistant to the festival directors Jerome Rose and Julie Kadersha. It is a pleasure to welcome all of you here tonight and to welcome our online audiences from around the world. The festival would like to thank our Italian and German viewers who were up very late with us this evening, wish a good morning to our online audiences from Hong Kong and Australia, and a good evening to our viewers from Canada, Argentina, and all of you with us tonight at the Kaye Playhouse at Hunter College. It's an honor to have David Dubal with us tonight. As many of you know, David Dubal has done so much good for classical music. His work over the course of his brilliant career has inspired young musicians from around the world and given young music scholars the opportunity to get inside the minds of the great artists. You can listen to his program, Reflections from the Keyboard, on WQXR on Thursday nights at 8 p.m., and it replays on Sunday nights at 10 p.m. On behalf of IKIF, we would like to thank Yamaha Artist Services. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Dubal.
The honor, Scott, is mine that you introduced me. Thank you so much. Glad to be here again, and I know that you will enjoy this extraordinary three-concerto evening. The last concerto, number 9, is one of the really great works of Mozart's concerto literature. They're all wonderful, but this number 9 is a spectacular early effusion where absolutely nobody could have expected at age 22 this totally mature classical concerto. In fact, it defines the great classical concertos that will happen later. I was seeing a movie once, I don't remember, a French movie. It was a good movie, as a lot of French movies are. Not too many explosions or too many guns. And the main character was always listening. He had a roommate. The main character was always listening to Mozart. Mozart, 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 and he just never stopped. And his roommate said, "What, I don't understand this. I mean, Mozart's terrific, but, I mean, why don't you listen to some Schubert or some Wagner or Beethoven?" And he said something that I think is so great. He said to his roommate, "Mozart is enough for me." And you know, if you had to define your life spiritually, morally, philosophically, in every way, Mozart is a whole life in itself. How he did it in this life is extraordinary. I want to read from my own book, The Essential Canon of Classical Music. As you know, you can buy this anywhere. on the internet, on Amazon, at Farrar Straus, on God knows where. I don't myself buy any of my books. I don't even read them unless it's here. But they're all pretty good. I write here in my Mozart chapter, Mozart died just before the dawn of the 19th century, an era that desired sterner stuff than his music. To 19th century ears, his work sounded tame and rococo, and he seemed like a doll dressed in an outmoded costume. His elegance and formal beauty were noted, but often he was thought of as merely a predecessor of the more turbulently dramatic Beethoven. And that's the same with Haydn. In The Will to Power, Friedrich Nietzsche called Mozart a delicate and lovable soul, but quite 18th century, even when he is serious. Nietzsche himself, a real lover of music and, of course, of the hot stuff, the hot love chords of Wagner. Today, however, commentators vie to outdo each other in proclaiming his genius. Mozart, ironically, given his feelings about it, is responsible for the fame and economy of his native Salzburg. Hated the city. Liquors, candies, and music festivals in his name abound. During his lifetime, he seldom heard any of his compositions performed twice. Couldn't put a radio on, record player, and he would be amazed at the monthly arrival of new CDs of performances of his music. Today's complex world finds Mozart a balm for sagging spirits. The historian Peter Gay, who just died, goes so far as to say that the only important thing that the 20th century produced was an appreciation for Mozart for every work he ever wrote. That was his assessment of the 20th century. So Mozart is always with us to prove otherwise. Well, I missed the sentence. For cynics who think human perfection is an impossibility, Mozart is always with us to prove otherwise. With him, we may walk through the paradise garden. It's one of my best sentences. I should patent it. The English pianist Myra Hess, in the bleakest hour during the bombings of London in World War II, received a letter from the great scientist Albert Einstein, who said, "We cannot despair about mankind, knowing that Mozart was a man." Isn't that fantastic? Writing on Mozart, the American novelist Saul Bellow says that, quote, "He learned for himself the taste of disappointment, betrayal, suffering, the weakness, foolishness, and vanity of flesh and blood, as well as the emptiness of cynicism. In him, we see a person who has only himself to rely on." How true. But what a self it is, and what art it has generated. How deeply, beyond words, Mozart speaks to us about the mysteries of our common human nature, and how unstrained and easy his greatness is. There's no wonder to me that as people get older, they become more entranced with Mozart. His total childlike, wondrous, airy nature. Horwitz said to me, "Mozart, #1. Schnabel the same. Rubinstein said to me, "Mozart is the first for me." There's something so pure, and this is, I think, the reason we need him so much. It's not only the perfection, It is the fact that everything in him stems from the finest aspects of youth itself. And indeed, he never ages. And indeed, in life, he never ages. In the realm of the piano concerto, Mozart has no rival, of course. In the 19th century, when played at all, he was usually treated, as I said, a frilly Rococo doll and performed in a mechanical style, which passed for classical good taste. Good taste was a very big phrase in the 18th century. By 1920, things had changed considerably, and Mozart was heard in all of his depth, passion, humor, and humanity. Artists of the caliber of Busoni, Fischer, Tovey, and Schnabel began exposing large segments of his piano music in concert. Saint-Saëns played at the Paris Conservatory all the concertos, and Proust never reviewed a piece of music in public in a journal except Saint-Saëns' performance of Mozart Concerto. So he's beginning to enter into the 20th century, and very much so. Now seldom does a month go by without concerto performances by Pariah or this one, that one, and many other wonderful pianists. Now this is what I like. Alfred Einstein, not Albert the scientist, but Alfred the musicologist, wrote, Mozart possessed a sensitiveness to sound that has remained altogether unique and was never again to be attained. Think about it carefully. The sensitive, not opulence of sound or largeness, and above all, an entirely different sphere of emotion. And here it is, at once sensuous and non-sensuous. This paradox in his music. Hovering between grace and melancholy, indeed, often changing color within a lightning-like abruptness. All of a sudden, the most wonderfully gay themes become melancholic. It's extraordinary, and then he will move. You don't even know what's happening. For this man is the greatest large-form concept of sound the world has ever known. He actually makes Beethoven like a child in that sense. Beethoven doesn't work in that level. He's a different kind of dramatist. But Mozart knows exactly how to take you, without you knowing it, into the sensuous and into the non-sensuous, into the melancholy, into the sunny. It's extraordinary. Most people don't even know it is happening, and it happens all the time in every work. We're going to hear three works, and we're going to not hear the ninth concerto, which is, I'm going to talk about it first, so we can, this ninth concerto, so I took it off the wrong place. So we're not going to right this minute. Let's listen to just a little bit, Matt, of the Allegro. You may not even get to the piano part. I just want you to hear a little bit of the 12th concerto, which was, although slight in technical means, it's not a hard concerto by any means compared to some, although Mozart's always difficult, no matter what, to bring out the grace. I want you to hear, this was one of Mozart's favorite concertos, and he taught this to almost every one of his students. Let's listen to first movement, Matt. not going to hear the piano unless you know how to push it forward just very fast, and then we'll hear a little bit of the piano. He's doing that right now. Okay, let's see what's... Okay, that's the end of that movement, Matt. We're done. We're going to go to the next movement and taste that, but first I want to say that Mozart's concertos are a very important part of his economic life, because when he comes to Vienna in 1781, he's the first really unemployed of the 18th century masters who depended upon patronage. He couldn't stand his home Salzburg potentate, and he kicked him in the ass once, and that was the end of their relationship. He came down much to his father's chagrin, and he began writing concertos from about number 15 to be heard in subscription, of which he would get the orchestra together, he would copy them out, he would play the soloists, he would get the singers, he would get the whole thing going, including the tickets, and get those tickets sold. It was not an easy procedure. He could only do that during Lent season, where the opera and the plays were not allowed to be heard, and he used this, and the greatest single group of aristocracy ever to put together in one theater came to hear Mozart's piano concertos played by him. Often the ink wasn't even dry. We're going to go to the second movement, always glorious in a Mozart concerto. This is marked Andante. Okay, you'll hear the piano part very shortly. Now let's hear the theme of the Allegretto. So wonderful. That's enough. That's wonderful. And you know, sometimes when I'm so sick of the great romantics, and I love them deeply, but I say, oh God, enough palpitation, enough sexuality, enough emotionalism. Please give me the purity of a Mozart melody. He's a great melodist, one of the finest. Now, remember this, he is tonality personified. Everything is Viennese tonality. He's born exactly at the right moment in the history of high classicism. And he's born quite a bit later in 1756 than Haydn in 1732, and we're going to hear Haydn, the most underrated of the great masters of all time. Haydn says this: he was 74 years old. He had such terrible rheumatism, he had to be carried from room to room by his servants. And he was unhappy with the fact that he was going to die. Oh God, how much is still to be done in this splendid art, even by a man like myself. That is how modest he was. The label Papa, in turn, conjures a picture of a benevolent old man who blithely wrote good-natured music. Never has a superficial image done more harm to a composer of such vitality, originality, and profundity. One critic wrote condescendingly, "Haydn compels our study just because he is so like other men, so amply representative of them within their own limitations." I'd strangle that man. There's no limitations in Haydn. We wouldn't have Mozart or Beethoven without him, and he is the equal of these composers, just different. Such nonsense has caused Haydn, except for a few works, to be all but obliterated from public musical performance. The 20th century concentrated mainly on its happy rediscovery of Mozart, and although Haydn research has taken great strides since 1950, he remains but a shadow in the performance world. Fortunately, recordings have preserved for us one of the most wonderful of all composers. Listen to his masses, listen to his piano trios. There's 88 of them, think of it. He's 1,400 works. Every single one of them are incomparable in one way or another. So we're going to hear the only surviving Mozart concerto, and let's hear the first movement, Vivace, of the D major. This is the last work Della Rocha played at Carnegie, Avery Fisher Hall, along with Faya. Go to the second movement, un poco adagio. Okay, Matt, we'll go to the third movement. taste, there's no doubt about it, and I can't give you a taste of the Ninth Concerto because I couldn't find the recording. And that meant I wasted 20 minutes of my precious life. In 1777, though, he wrote the Ninth Concerto. That's, you know, America is really starting to burst. It was January, and the 21-year-old Mozart composed what Einstein called his Eroica. It's in E-flat also. It was unprecedented in Mozart's already formidable output. And it's K271. It means 271 works with many, many multi-movement works. This is an important one, the most important work of his time at age 22, 21. Charles Rosen devotes no less than 17 pages and an extraordinary analysis of this score in his book, The Classical Style. And Maurice Hinson calls it a daring work on a majestic scale, one of the greatest of all the concertos. But because of its early chronology, the concerto is still not as well known as later examples like 20, 21, 22, on and on. In 1790, Haydn, who adored and understood the very different genius, although they learned from each other, Haydn and Mozart. Haydn was off to great triumphs in an 18-month tour of England, of London really, where he composed 6 of his greatest symphonies, the London symphonies. And he dined with Mozart. I would have liked to have been there. He had dinner with Mozart, and after dinner, they walked together for a while, and he hugged him. And Mozart said to him something so prophetic. He said, "Papa, I will never see you again." And 18 months later, the 35-year-old Mozart died. Eduard Grieg said it was the worst death that had ever happened to the human race. 35 years old, with his incomplete requiem, written not even for himself, but for some scoundrel who was going to use it in his own name. Remember, there were no copyrights. Haydn was bereft when in London he heard of the death of this young man who he had said to his father, "I don't know anyone, living or dead, that is a greater composer than your son." Always Haydn, the modest man. Haydn would go on and write 6 more symphonies where he would exploit the development section, which would in every way inspire the Beethoven symphonies. And he would write 12 London symphonies, but Mozart was no longer here. Dies in 1791. Beethoven would come to Vienna in 1792 and carry on the mantle. He saw him at the last performance of Creation, where Haydn collapsed in the middle and would leave. Beethoven ran to the huge door of the church to open it for him out of a sign of respect. I say this because there's too many references that Beethoven didn't appreciate Haydn. The first 3 sonatas, Opus 2, number 1, 2, and 3, are dedicated to Haydn. Indeed, he loved him and probably in some ways learned more from him than even Mozart. And that is what I have to say to you tonight.
Well, once again, we are in the Kaye Playhouse. My name is Jerome Rose, and we've just heard a wonderful pre-concert introduction by David Dubal. Tonight is a very important evening because it is the debut of the Jäger Meisters Chamber Orchestra, and you're about to hear them in about 15 to 20 minutes. A wonderful new ensemble with great soloists and great conductor. Eduard Zilberkant will be the conductor with 3 major soloists that will be coming on the stage. Will be Massimiliano Ferrati, and then Matei Varga, and the Jerome Concerto will be played by Huangci. The audience is coming in, and I have with me 2 of our very splendid faculty, and we are trying to just encourage you to view the concert tomorrow night, which will be once again in the Kaye Playhouse. I have with me Gesa Luecker and Gabriele Leporatti. She is from Germany and he is from Italy, and they are married. And I'm very happy that they are married because I was at the wedding, and was very encouraging because they have had master classes with me, and I'm very excited that they are here and teaching and active. And please tell me about your impressions of New York. You've been here many times, and what you think about this festival.
Yeah, we are of course very, very happy to be here, the 5th time already. We were here in 2005 as students. Actually, we started to be here as students, and we were already so impressed and so influenced and inspired. And of course, it's a big honor and a big pleasure to be here now as teachers since 5 years, and we are enjoying incredibly the town, the city, but especially, of course, the festival, the wonderful students, the wonderful level. Especially this year, I must say, I have at least the very subjective feeling that the level increased. And yeah, we are enjoying to teach, and we are enjoying to attend the wonderful concerts. And it's great to have it now here in Hunter with fantastic facilities. The practice facilities are much better, and the pianos are wonderful. So it's just a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, you make me feel very happy because in many ways you are my progeny. You've studied here. The people that are playing this evening have also worked here. I've been able to be part of their lives, and it's very exciting. Eduard Zilberkant, I've known for 30 years. He was formerly my student, Matei, and so on. It's been very exciting to have you here. But also, Gesa, you are married to this wonderful Italian pianist, and you live, both of you, in Germany. Gabriele, tell me about yourself and what it's like to live in Düsseldorf and teach and be married to this beautiful girl.
Well, life is exciting when you can share it between 2 countries such as Germany and Italy. Sometimes it doesn't, maybe you don't sleep more than 3 nights in the same bed, but you know, that is what every musician does, and that's one part of the job, let's say like that. And it's beautiful to be married to a pianist, actually, because it's, besides playing together like we will do tomorrow in the faculty concert, it's very inspiring. Every time, every day actually of our life, music is a central part, and through our different views many times we enrich each other so much, and we inspire each other so much that I wouldn't imagine anything else actually. This is there is no concurrence whatsoever. There is just constant enriching.
Oh, it's exciting. But you talk about, being married to a pianist, that's also wonderful, but the problem is, the logistics of both of you practicing at the same time. It must be created a lot of difficulties.
Oh, we have the big luck to have an apartment, which is actually in Hanover, so we are between 2 cities, where we don't hear each other, and no neighbors are hearing us, so we are there still because of that situation.
So you've solved the problem. I often think about the famous joke of Teresa Carreño and Eugene d'Albert. Quick, Eugene, your children and my children are fighting with our children. So it's a wonderful, it's a famous situation of pianists being married to each other.
Absolutely.
But tell me a little bit about the program tomorrow night. You'll be playing Messiaen. Why don't you tell me why you selected Messiaen and why that has become important in terms of, playing together?
Yeah, I mean, Messiaen is anyway in our lives already a long time. We are both having experience since our studying time. Both of our teachers at the conservatory in Florence and for me in Hanover were totally Messiaen fanatics. And so we are in contact with that music a long time. There was always somebody who played in the class Ile de Feu or Varga or something like this. And now we are looking more and more for periods, also for two pianos repertoire. We do it every once in a while, and so it came to us that we finally do this masterpiece, which is not only a masterpiece inside the Messiaen repertoire, but also in the entire repertoire.
The title is what?
The Vision de la Main. And we will play the number 5 out
Vision
of
de la
7.
Main, and of course translate that for our international audience.
The Visions of Amen, of the Amen. And of course, it's a highly spiritual Christian oriented or influenced of the Bible exegete Messiaen, which he let influence all his views and interpretation of the Bible and his own spiritual life. And we are playing out of 7, which is also a holy number. We play the number 5, which is the vision of the angels, the saints, and the song of the birds. And yeah, it's a wonderful piece where you can hear all these 3 sections, and they're inside even real birds, like he did later on. He did write the name of the birds in his partitures, and in our piece it's not yet written directly inside which one is which bird, which motif, but he writes in other places that there's actually the nightingale, the blackbird, and other birds inside. So
wonderful.
That's
all right, I have to ask, because it's an important question. You come from 2 opposite, completely distinctive cultures. And I would like to know, Gabriele, where did you meet Gesa, and how did you manage to get together and eventually marry?
We met in Germany at a piano competition in Bremen in 2003, so it's already 12 years. In the beginning I was hopping between 2 countries, Italy and Germany, because I would visit her more and more frequently, and then eventually got to the point where we decided to marry. And yes, this is actually, it's a very simple and normal love story. Only we happen to do the same job, and this is actually a plus of us, I think.
Well, it's a beautiful love story, because I know your German has gotten exceptionally good, and Gesa's Italian is also completely fluent now. So the 2 of you have much in common, and of course your common language for a long time was English.
Yes,
it was indeed.
But our own kind of English.
Yes.
It was a mixture of all cultures.
Well, I find it extremely exciting that you are here, and that we are going to hear you tomorrow night. It's going to be on this wonderful stage, and 2 beautiful pianos. One will be a Bösendorfer, and the other will be a Yamaha. And I have this wonderful faculty that's going to be playing this repertoire of the Liszt Rhapsody with Mikola Suk, and we have the Albanians with Jose Ramos Santana. Lina Nalchuk is going to do a whole Chopin group, and as you can hear, this wonderful orchestra is warming up. It's going to be a very exciting concert. Eduard Zilberkant is going to be our conductor. He's the conductor of the Fairbanks Orchestra. And of course, the first soloist is going to be Massimiliano Ferrati in the Kirchel 414. Then we have the Haydn D major with Matei Varga, and it will be followed by Claire Huangci playing the Jerome, the famous Kaye 271, and it's going to be an exciting event. Tell me, this is exciting for you, because we've not heard an orchestra during the festival before.
That's true. There are some innovations this year which we enjoy extremely. Also the concert with the cembalo, clavicembalo with Magdalena Waszewska some nights ago. These are things which refresh, of course, the entire atmosphere and experience of listening, because piano music is very beautiful, it's fantastic, but after 2 weeks, only piano solo, one is very happy to hear also some other instruments.
Well, the joy, of course, I called it the Keyboard Festival, because during the 17 years of our existence, we've had organ, we've had cembalo, and of course, the only thing we haven't had is a clavichord, because nobody could hear it in a theater like this. But we're still excited to have all of this taking place. And of course, we cover the entire gamut of the keyboard repertoire literally from Scarlatti, Bach, all the way through. Last night we had all the works of Ligeti, the Ricciocata, and it's an exciting experience. Tell me a little bit now. You'll be here. You're going back to Europe. What's in the future for you, both of you?
Oh, there are some concerts coming up. There are some CD recording plans, not yet to be published. But yeah, first of all, we are studying new repertoire for the next season. We use always the summer in Italy to have some where we don't have to teach to practice new repertoire, and so it will.
Well, Gabriele, you're making some recordings as well, are you not?
I did. My last recording, which is coming out later this summer, is solo music by Respighi, Ottorino Respighi.
Well, that's an unusual thing. Respighi is not really known as being much of a piano composer.
Indeed. His orchestral works are normally the most played of his. But actually, he has a very small but very, very fine oeuvre for piano solo. And I recorded the sonata in F minor and the notturno, which is out of the 6 pieces, together with, again, a German red line, together with Schumann. Schumann, Opus 133, Gesänge der Frühe, and Schumann Great Fantasy in C major.
Fantastic. Well, as you can hear, we are very excited about this orchestra. I can barely hear anybody because the orchestra is warming up. The acoustics at the top of the Kaye Playhouse are just exquisite, and I'm very excited because this is a major event and a major transition in the history of the festival. And we're delighted that you have been here for so long, and I hope you'll continue to come back. And as you know, we have lots of pasta and good wine in our future. So has she become much of an Italian cook in all these years that you've been together?
Well, she is actually a tremendous cook, even though I am improving and taking care.
He's much more cooking than me.
He's much more cooking than you. Well, as you know, the cuisine of Italy is very, very famous, and I'm sure that's one of the attractions that you have offered your lovely, charming wife. I'm delighted because I've known you kids for so long. To me, you're kids because I've known you for so long, and I've seen you grow up. I've seen you mature, and I'm delighted that I'm able to have you here on this faculty because you bring such enthusiasm for the music and such enthusiasm for your lives together. Well, so it's a great symbol of what this festival has meant over the years.
Yeah, I mean it was a fantastic experience in 2005, back when we were students, because we can say that our life changed here. I mean, in these 15 days, when students come here and they have a full immersion of music and concerts and performances and lectures and master classes, the scope of the musicianship and the sheer abilities just improve so much, and you can, after these 2 weeks, you can feed from this in the months after, and maybe you think that what you learn is finished after the master class, but actually it drops and continues in the month following it. So.
Well, as you know, one of the main features of the festival is that the students can move from teacher to teacher and from class to class. As I say, we have well over 1,000 master classes, so that gives you the entire scope of the piano repertoire. So we're delighted, and thank you for being here. This is a pre-concert feature, and I will turn this now over to our soloists and conductor of the evening, and this is the debut of the Jäger Meisters Chamber Orchestra. Thank you for being with us, and I'll be back at intermission to speak to some of our other faculty members and enjoy the concert.
like to take a moment to remind you that the taking of photographs and the use of recording devices are strictly prohibited. In addition, please be sure that your cellular telephones and electronic pagers are turned off at this time. Any use of these devices inside the theater is prohibited by the City of New York. Thank you.
Well, here we are after the first half of the debut of the Jäger Meisters Chamber Orchestra. I see that Stephen Mayer has arrived. He's one of our great faculty members who will be performing tomorrow night. But I really want to commend this orchestra. And I'll have to stand up for a second and let Stephen get in. Please. Why don't you hand one of the microphones to Stephen and we'll share this one.
Okay.
Good. Well, let me just say, Eduard Zilberkant was the conductor, and we had already the soloist Massimiliano Ferrati playing the Concerto 414 and the great Haydn Concerto played by Matei Varga. I was very excited by this, and this is a new first in the history of the International Keyboard Institute Festival. We are on the stage, of course, of the Kaye Playhouse in Hunter College, and delighted that everyone has supported us to such a degree. I'm sitting with the gentleman here. This is Jose Ramos Santana and Stephen Mayer, very old friends of mine on the faculty, and actually have appeared many, many times in concert in this festival. And we're delighted because we are actually talking about the concert that will take place tomorrow night on the stage of the Kaye. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to be here. Our pleasure.
Well, as you know, you're playing some of the great works of the repertoire. You, Jose, are playing this wonderful Iberia of Albéniz, and I know this is very close to your heart because you have actually worked on these with Alicia de la Rocha in Barcelona.
Indeed.
And I hope you appreciate my TH pronouncing Barcelona perfectly, because you're the one who really knows how to speak Spanish. Now you have to listen to this. I love the fact that you are from Puerto Rico, and that I, as a 16-year-old man, listened to the recording of Jesus Maria San Roma,
yes,
who was the only one of the few recordings of the MacDowell Concerto. So I have a great affinity and love for your island nation. But what brings you now? You studied all over the world, and of course, here you are, one of the most famous pianists coming out of that wonderful country.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've been here since I was 16 years old. I studied at the Juilliard School, and with Adele Marcus and Sylvia Rabinoff, and then I went to Leon Fleischer, and also I coached with Alicia in Iberia, and I've been in the Orient, I've been in South America, I've been in Europe, I've been around the country, so I've been around.
Well, you bring such an international flavor to this music, and of course, Iberia is very, very close. You grew up speaking Spanish, of course, here.
Yes. The first Iberia piece that I learned was El Puerto when I was 14 years old, and El Albaicin. And then as I got a little bit older, I learned Triana at Juilliard with Adele Marcus. And then I finished the whole suite, and I played it for Art de la Rocha. And it was, my teachers also in Puerto Rico had studied with, one of them with Ricardo Viñez. He coached with him, who was one of the great first interpreters of Granados and Albéniz. So, and they were very well known for that. So my heritage, I grew up with that music since I was a little kid. So it's like second nature to me.
Well, just to make the point, I still remember the sensation that De La Rocha caused when she came to America, playing Granados and Albéniz. I mean, other than Rubinstein, no one had actually played this music to that degree in concert all over the United States.
Yes, and not only she played it, but how she played it. I mean, it was superb musicianship and superb pianism, and it brought these pieces to a level nobody ever imagined they could be played like that. And really, it's after she plays the way she did, it's very hard to follow. It's a hard act to follow.
Well, you follow it beautifully.
Thank
now,
you.
Stephen Mayer is one of America's foremost pianists. He's recorded any number of things. I still remember the days when you were one of the few pianists in the world who actually played the Max Reger piano concerto. Tell me about that and all of your relationships. You did this in the Netherlands, I believe.
That's right. Actually, I began my professional career in the Netherlands in the late 1970s. And one of my first concerts was indeed with the Hague Philharmonic with a Reger concerto. And I moved on to play with all of the orchestras of the Netherlands and then quite a few others throughout Europe. And as recently as 2 months ago, I toured with the Vienna Academy Orchestra in the De Profundis, the Totentanz, and the Concerto No. 3 by Franz Liszt, all of which I had premiered with the London Symphony, and I had the good fortune also to get the Liszt Prize for that. And I think, Jerry, you also have gotten the Liszt Prize.
Yes, both of us are Liszt Society Prize winners from Budapest.
But
I'm very happy about that, of course.
This is off topic because my other career is to play Art Tatum. And
Well,
tomorrow
we
night,
certainly are going to talk about Art Tatum, and I have spent a great deal of my time in Toledo, Ohio, which was the home growing. This is the home of Art Tatum, and you've come many,
Absolutely.
many times. They've brought you there many, many times to play Art Tatum. But let's talk a little bit more about your classical background
Sure.
before we move into Art Tatum.
sure, yeah.
Now, you studied at Juilliard. You've actually been all over. We've known each other for years and years and years. And tell me more, because this whole relationship with Jäger I found exciting. I mean, you have this tremendous capacity to learn these enormously monumental works and play them to such a degree that you even mentioned the ones that you played with the Vienna Academy Orchestra. Fantastic. So do you love these great monsters that nobody plays?
I do, and I find that there's a special thrill in bringing something forward that is not overplayed, and it seems like a personal adventure in some ways, completely devoid of influence of recordings and performances, and there's a special freedom that one gets when one learns pieces in this way. So it has been a great pleasure for me to play some of this kind of repertoire, absolutely.
Well, it's exciting to know that there is somebody still, you and of course Marc-André Hamelin, who've brought these wonderful works to the fore, and that no one has actually remembers them, and they're masterpieces that should certainly be remembered. Now let's talk a little bit about your enormous work in Art Tatum, and of course in the field of American transcriptions and this kind of music. You're playing Bernstein. You're going to be doing some Mason. Which Mason brother is this? Because Mason is a very famous name in American history.
This is the son of the man who started music in public schools in America. His name is William Mason, and he was a piano student of Franz Liszt. He came back and he composed a good deal of piano music, toured throughout America, and then also was an educator himself. I'm playing tomorrow night the Silver Spring, which is one of his loveliest compositions, quite Lisztian in the way it's cast, and I follow that by my own transcription of Leonard Bernstein's The Mask from Age of Anxiety. And I simply conflated all the parts in the piece and turned them into something that you could play with two hands almost. And then I follow that finally with the Tiger Rag by Art Tatum, which is, well, sort of one of his most fun numbers. And it's original Dixieland jazz band music, which was made partially famous by Art Tatum himself. He was one of the first people to play it on the piano, and I dare say at a speed that it hasn't been played at since.
Well, what is so wonderful about you and what your contribution, because you've brought all this history of American piano playing and American composition, which very few people are really aware of. I mean, the fact that a William Mason had actually studied in the workshop in Weimar with none other than the great Franz Liszt. Another one of the great members of that household who came to this country was Leopold Damrosch, who created the entire Damrosch family, which of course Frank Damrosch was the head of public school music in New York, and Walter Damrosch was of course the conductor of the New York Philharmonic. A great family and a great tradition. I'm so delighted you were able to do this. But of course we have the great tradition of Spanish music coming to this country. Artur Rubinstein, one of the great performers. I'm sure that you, Jose, have often heard these recordings and of course have admired them as well. He had in fact his whole career was resuscitated both in Spain and in South America when it dipped in the 30s, you know?
Yes, indeed. I never heard him live playing Spanish music. I did hear his recordings of Triana and Navarra, and they were landmarks at that time. He played it in a very particular way, his own way. But when we get to somebody like De La Rocha and Viñes, they worked together with Granados and Albéniz, so they knew exactly the tradition of how to play the things. And of course, Alicia being a pupil of Granados, and Granados was a very interesting person because he arrived to the same conclusions that the great pedagogues in Germany about piano playing were getting arriving to, and they didn't know about each other, but they were the same thing about pedaling, about phrasing, about colors, and that's why we hear in De La Rocha's interpretation. Now, the curious thing was that when I studied with Adele Marcus, she had never even been to Spain, but she was able to grasp in pieces like the Evocación and Andalucía by De Falla the same spirit, number one, and the same pianissimo and musicianship. When I went to work with De La Rocha, it was like an extension of what Adele had taught me. So I found it very, very interesting that both Russian and Spanish sort of converge in this way.
Tell me about the French influence through Debussy and Ravel on this music. How much do you think that penetrated in terms of the pianism and the whole style of sound and pedaling, all the things that you mentioned?
Yes, obviously Albéniz was very influenced by Debussy, and he lived in exile in Paris for many years. His coloration of harmonies and the textures that he creates are very impressionistic. And they are impressionistic works because they are not really quotations, they are suggestions of dances, of the real folkloric flamenco spirit. The Falla was much more literal, and he was able to quote, but the greatness of Albéniz was that he was able to suggest these things, to the point that Debussy thought that, for example, a work like El Albaicín was just a complete masterwork. So they had a mutual admiration for each other.
Well, one of the things that's the most impressive, of course, is in Albéniz is the unbelievable pianism and the virtuosity that is so ingrained in this music. You have to be an absolutely superb pianist to be able to play this music. Now tell me, in the works of Art Tatum, how much classical influence? This was a master pianist, and of course it is extremely necessary to note that this man also was practically legally blind. And what do you think about his development of technique? Because he was unique. Horowitz and many of the great classical pianists used to love to hear Art Tatum. What do you say to that?
Yes, just to pick up quickly on the last point, Horowitz and Rachmaninoff used to sneak into clubs down at 52nd Street in New York in the 1940s to hear Art Tatum. And both of them were absolutely amazed at his ability to play at speeds that were scarcely human, and also with a beauty of sound and a depth of tone, though at low dynamic levels, that really very, very few pianists of any kind have ever achieved. Tatum's development is really something that defies any explanation. He took a little bit of classical training at a very young time, but very quickly moved on, realizing that he had no chance to have a career in classical music as a African American, and he incorporated a lot of the techniques of Chopin and Liszt in his jazz, but with a harmonic vocabulary and a rhythmic drive that was entirely jazz-like. So it was a fabulous sort of combination of things, and it's looked back now at, I think, by jazz pianists as an absolute climax of what was possible in jazz piano, and I don't think it's been something that's been equaled since.
Well, the amazing development of his ear and his ability, his agility, his kinesthetic ability at the instrument was really phenomenal. And has there ever been anyone who ever came close to Tatum in terms of that kind of mastery?
I don't believe there really has. I think people have talked about some others, but very few.
Well, we are about to close this intermission feature, and we invite you to hear the concert tomorrow night. We have Nina Lelchuk playing Chopin, we have Mikola Suk playing the Franz Liszt Rhapsody, and then of course these gentlemen are going to appear. And I believe there should be some Scriabin as well, played by Dmitry Rachmaninoff. So it's going to be a very fascinating, interesting feature. Right now we're going to have Eduard Zilberkant the Jäger Chamber Orchestra, and of course the Jäger Meisters Chamber Orchestra, I should say, and Claire Huangci, this wonderful pianist out of Philadelphia. She's absolutely brilliant, and it's the Jerome Köchel 271 of Mozart. Thank you, and we will see you again tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you.